I have helped hundreds, if not more people, get their lives together and feel better about themselves and to surpass the effects of trauma and what trauma can have on you.
I think we may look back in 20 years and say, do you remember when we used to do psychotherapy without psychedelics?
I was in Afghanistan a year after I joined. We should have been getting the correct help that we're meant to be receiving. There should have been proper follow-ups from that tour. We ended up self-medicating and kind of doing the work ourselves. When you first get back, everyone's really scared of the word PTSD. It's like, ugh, like, who's got it? Stay away from them. It's infectious, which I kind of do get because...
It's almost like a diagnosis that you're broken.
I moved in originally with my nan, bless her, who's like my little Yoda full of drops of wisdom. We had a nice time together, but unfortunately last summer she passed away. She had a stroke. And I was here with her actually when she had that stroke. And luckily I picked her up from the bed and like we laid down together, and she was, you know, it had potential to be quite a traumatizing experience for me. And she was like laying down, she's like, I'm scared, but I was like holding her and looking after her. I was like, don't worry, Nan, it's all right, the ambulance is on its way. She kind of drifted out of consciousness. So it was like a really powerful lesson, like my nan passing in a very natural way compared to Afghanistan where it was like, bang, dead. I don't use this seat anymore, but it's always handy if you're coming in a bit drunk. Take the seat upstairs. Some photos up here. There's me in Afghanistan and a few of them. Looking very young and very skinny. But here's like the metal detector. And that's what I used to use to sweep for IEDs. Scary job because, you know, you're looking for bombs in the floor, and if you miss one, then whoever's walking behind you is going to step on it. So you have a lot of weight on your shoulders. We had some good times in Afghanistan, laying underneath the stars, sat around a fire, flying in helicopters 5 meters off the ground, seeing your shadows, the sun shining through like one side of the helicopter, hitting the floor, you got your headphones in. But like looking back, like it was cool for the wrong reasons. I didn't know what I was fighting for. It was just, I wanted that sense of belonging. It was a pretty tough tour. We took on a lot of casualties. I lost my best friend, which at the time I was literally watching as he took a bullet to the face. So that was, you know, your world begins to spin. Watching him die was like a massive shock to my body, and it was stored as like a really bad sort of traumatic image in my mind for a long time.
There's just not a lot that the army provides, or it doesn't do enough to reach out or to acknowledge when people were suffering.
For the last 15 years, I've been in psychedelic research, developing MDMA, psilocybin, DMT, LSD, ketamine as tools to treat mental illnesses. The concept of psychedelics in medicine is a radically different new way. It's a paradigm-shifting approach in how we use medicines in combination with psychotherapy to get to the root cause of a problem and get a patient better forever. So there's many different sorts of psychedelics, and they work in different ways in the brain. The classic psychedelics like LSD and psilocybin and DMT work via a receptor called the serotonin 2A receptor. And those classic drugs work very much by producing this altered state of consciousness in which a person is able to tackle the stuckness and the rumination that normally goes with and maintains long-term mental illnesses. And they radically alter the stuckness that we carry around with us. And then that allows the patient to reboot and rebrand and rebuild their world and their inner world and their approach to the outer world in a new way. So when combined with psychotherapy in a facilitative setting in which they prepared for this experience and then they spend weeks integrating the experience, it can radically shift someone in a new direction.
Because I slowed down and decided that I was leaving the army, all the memories and feelings start coming back into like the front of your mind. I was just very tearful, always thinking about Martin, always thinking about death. I left England, I was like, bye England, don't want to be here, and did ski seasons. I went to Portugal and did a surf season, then back to France, then back to Portugal. It was all about the adventure sports. It takes you out of your own mind. You have to be so present and so in the moment. But then slowly, because around these environments there's a big drinking culture, it just turned into a very unhealthy sort of way that I was traveling the world. I wasn't really seeing it, I was just drinking a lot. I got to the point where I had to ring the Samaritans and like speak to them because I was feeling very like suicidal. I just didn't want to be around, didn't want to exist. I started watching TED Talks on psychology and depression. That's when I came across the psychedelic TED Talks and stuff, and I was like, I really believe in that. Like, I believe there is like a good way to use drugs, as long as, you know, it's done in the right, correct way.
They are golden teachers, that's the only strain that I do. They're called golden teachers because of their shamanistic properties and because they have a golden cap. You know when they're ready to be picked because the veil has become very thin. So this one's ready and this one's ready. And the others will probably be ready in about 2 days. Just either supplying or doing trips with people, I have helped hundreds, if not more people, get their lives together and feel better about themselves and to surpass the effects of trauma and what trauma can have on you. It started off healing me because at first it was really good fun, and then through periods of time I started getting interested in growing them and then giving them to my friends, and then the demand just got more and more and more, so I started selling, and that's when I became a world-renowned criminal. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that they're illegal. On paper they're as dangerous as cocaine, as heroin, as anything. The movement really goes back to Charles Manson and the idea that psychedelics can actually lead to delusions. And then that leads on to Nixon and the war on drugs, which became a global thing. And then in 1971, there's this big movement all over the world to stop the hallucinogenic and psychedelic movement and make everything illegal. These are all the perfect colour. This golden, this is why they're golden teachers. And if it's these little dots and things like that, they're gorgeous. I'm very much a science guy, and my spiritual side is not mystical. It's very much grounded in what our minds are capable of and what the chemicals in the mushrooms are capable of doing to your mind to make you learn about yourself, your spirit, and the world. So what I do is you go down here to the stem and very lightly you want to sort of rock it and twist at the same time because you don't want to bruise it. It's an amazing part of a healing process. The reason why it's global, and it has been global, and we've lost touch of it here, is because we feel like we've risen above it and we've sort of brushed that over and associated it with with savagery, you know, from the Victorian era, from colonialism. And I think that dressing it up slightly different, or giving a psychotherapist an opportunity to explore it, is the way that it's going to be branded and sold to people and help thousands, if not millions of people.
So I went to Barcelona and did a LSD retreat with a couple who looked after me for 3 or 4 days. We did a bit of pre-therapy work, a bit of hypnosis sort of work. On the second night, took 3 drops of LSD. The guy took it with me and his partner didn't take it, so she was sober. We just made like a nice therapeutic sort of space and area. And just like kind of laid down and talked about everything. Childhood trauma and then military trauma, and it was just going along like the sort of timeline, questioning certain parts of my story, which were like opening up my brain to thinking about it in a different way. It was like my trauma was just laid out in strands along the floor and I could see them. You break down this sort of demon devil thing and look at yourself in like a different way. Your brain just has all these epiphanies and all these breakthroughs and all these understandings because your ego's offline. It knocks out this default mode network sort of area in the front of your brain and allows you to make the necessary connections in your brain that you hadn't made before because you gave yourself this narrative which was just supporting this person that you thought you were. Then there's the sudden breakthrough. And like the door opened to like my heart. You just feel showered in like love for yourself and you accept love and you emanate love. I think that's everything. This stuff has all been locked away at my mum's house in storage for years. Goodness. I can't even remember what the badges signify, you know? It's been that long. What's this? Capture cards. I guess if we come across any enemy that we captured. When I came back from the Barcelona trip, I was so excited that I'd got all this stuff out of my head, and I went back to Mum's house and I was like, I don't have PTSD anymore. And she was like, oh right, like where did you go? I was like, I went to Barcelona and I did a 10-hour trip on LSD and I got rid of my PTSD essentially. And she was like, are you talking about drugs? And I was like, yeah. She's like, oh, I prefer not to know. And it's just, for me, like that sticks, not because my mum was wrong. My mum reacted like the way, because she was a teacher, my mum reacted just like teachers have been told to react. And then even to this day, it causes a lot of arguments to the point, yeah. But from the work that I've done on myself, none of this is about blaming parents or society. You can't. This has come from, you know, politics from the 1970s. If something has been created by politicians in order to control society and it doesn't come from research, which there's thousands of papers on to show that this is beneficial medicine, then you got to challenge that. No, these are definitely the ones that I've fought in. Oh. We're in the money. That's a nice little find. $20. Psychedelics had a period in the 60s which was really promising, and then another period in early 2000s. And now we're in a time which they're becoming more accessible because other countries such as America are driving forward this renaissance of use of psychedelics as a psychotherapeutic drug.
If we'd spent the last 40, 50 years continually studying psychedelics and developing them as medical tools, I guess it's arguable that we'd be 50 years ahead of where we are now. It's not about drug users just having a hedonistic time. The real tragedy, the real losers, I often say that they're caught in the crossfire of the war on drugs, are the patients.
I thought I would learn my way out of my PTSD and my trauma and apply to university. So now I'm at Roehampton University studying psychology and counselling. I was messaging like researchers all over the country. I want in. Can I be on the research team? Like, I'm a veteran. I'm deeply passionate about this work. I really believe that everyone should have access to this. And Robin Carhart-Harris, who's just like one of the pioneering minds of psychedelics in the UK. He got back to me and put me on to Keith Abraham, who's set up the Heroic Hearts Project. So we're Heroic Hearts Project UK for veterans and emergency personnel. I'd learn how to trip sit and help people process their psychedelic experience.
So many people were killing themselves last summer. There was a period of about 8 weeks where there were 2 veterans every day killing themselves. And I was sat there paralysed, knowing that there's this medicine.
Here's a bunch of incredibly useful and safe medicines that patients are being denied because of sloppy politics. That's a tragedy for science at the highest level.
There it is. Someone spilt some juice or...
So did you come to Martin's funeral?
No, still in Afghanistan. I think that was the hardest bit because you can't come back for any of the repatriations or anything. So you miss out on like sort of grieving process and saying goodbye and seeing his family or going with my family. Would have been closure, especially at that time. He looks so young. I guess we all looked that young at that time. But he shall forever look young. And your mate. No matter how much people want to be the dark versions of themselves, I want to go back out to war. I want to, I'm this man and I'm this and this. The core of human nature, everyone just wants to be loved, everyone wants to hear their story be told, everyone wants to heal from it and be supported. It's everyone's right to have their own hero's journey. I want everyone to experience that. Like, everyone has their own unique story, beautiful stories. And I just want to help people through research and through working with the medicine in whatever way. I don't know which route I'll go down. I just want everyone to realise that power within them and that to fall back in love with themselves and like human nature. I just don't want anyone else to suffer the way I suffered.